Hello, Forrest. How are you doing? Well, I'm back in Japan now after having another boots on the ground trip in August. And this time, man, was I wrong. I spent 2 weeks in New Mexico, 5 days at my actual location, boots on the ground. I had flown from Japan with all that associated expense, absolutely determined to finish it this time. And what I ended up with was some damage to my pocketbook, achy knees, wounded pride, and a sense that I'm still missing something important, something which I will have to spend the winter break thinking about and regrouping perhaps for next year. So all this experience, this latest trip, has me thinking about failure and its place in the chase. We all face it, whether or not we're searching just from our armchairs or whether we're taking trips to locations in one of the 4 search states to check things out. So how do we manage failure? Well, first of all, failure, I think, has to be measured in terms of our expectations. It's all about managing these expectations and our preparations to accept the real potential of failure every time we go out and search. To be in the right frame of mind to search for the treasure, we need to have a clear sense of the costs and the risks versus the potential benefits. So, like I've said in some of my earlier videos, the costs and the risks are simple things like the time involved, the money involved, your health, your safety, the effect on your relationships and your work, against the potential benefits. Now, I'm sure there are a number of searchers out there who think of the benefit as getting rich, finding the treasure, having the actual gold in their hands. I'm not talking about that as benefits, considering that for all the searches that have gone on since you announced your treasure hunt in 2010, to the best of everybody's knowledge, the treasure hasn't been found, so any such attempts have to be defined as unsuccessful. So potential benefits basically boils down to whether or not you find enjoyment in it, whether it's fun, whether it's a healthy thing for you, whether it's educational, whether it stimulates your thinking or your personal growth, whether you find stress release in it, whether you find it spiritually satisfied. The question is whether or not you get some enjoyment out of it, some benefit out of it. Overall, when we balance off our costs and risks versus our benefits, we need to follow a very important principle. In everything we do related to the chase, it's my feeling that we need to act in a way that does not lead us to later regrets. It's like people who gamble regularly and go to the casino. Some people, manage this in a responsible way. They know their limits, they know their budgets, they go there to enjoy and have a good time. They enjoy the process, whether or not they win or lose. There are others who expect to get rich quick and then just dig themselves deeper into holes. This is not a responsible way to manage this hobby and pastimes. So the casino analogy, I think, is not that much of a stretch when you consider the great chance of coming home again without the chest versus the small observed chance of actually finding it, in the sense that so many people have tried and no one is known yet to have succeeded. So since failure to find the chest is by far the most likely outcome of the search, when you consider the 2 possibilities, chest or no chest, we then need to focus on the process, because that's what we have. So the first thing we should really consider is that rather than being a dirty word, failure can actually really mean progress. So consider this little loop that we have here at the top. We can think of the search for the chest as being a process which may start with an idea and then proceed to planning based on the idea. I don't have the trick yet of being able to point by continuing to look at the camera. Then testing our idea, whether it's at home, going through resources, going through the book, testing against the poem, even testing against other people's opinions, or whether we actually go out in the field and test our ideas in an actual search, boots on the ground. And then after testing, if, as it seems to have happened in every case so far, we don't find the chest, then we go through a period of reflection where we take stock, reconsider based on what it is that we've noticed or found, and then go through the cycle again. If the reflection period bears fruit, we may come up with new perspectives, new ideas that then allow us to go through the cycle again. So you can think of this loop as what happens when you don't find the chest. That is, failure to find the chest. It's an engine that goes round and round and round and round. And that's where we are as searchers most of the time, at one of these points on this loop. Either we have our ideas, we're planning, we're testing them, we're reflecting them, and we go through them again and again. And for some of us, for those of us who don't find the chest, but decide that we've had enough, if we run out of ideas, then we might as well just go home and play canasta. So there's two exit points of the loop. One is success with the chest, and one is canasta without it. So this is our experience. So in this loop, testing and reflection should lead to new insights and ideas. And then how we manage that is interesting. So if we test and fail to find the chest and then reflect, we could end up leading to a pruning of an idea or some sort of backtracking, to rewind or unwind your ideas a bit, go back to an earlier state. We may be able to identify new prospects, as a result of having tested an idea, having the idea fail. It may then naturally promote in our thinking some other possibilities that we had put aside earlier, or entirely new ideas may suggest themselves. In my case, when I went to New Mexico, I had specific things that I wanted to try. And even though they didn't work out, I feel that it was a progress of sorts, simply because I was able to, as a result, clarify my thinking. There are certain ideas, certain theories, certain models that I had in mind, which I can now rule out. And just by freeing up some of that mental space, new ideas, new possibilities become stronger, and they suggest themselves. So this process of idea, planning, testing, reflecting, taking a break, refreshing your thinking, the whole process, all 4 points of that loop are ultimately something that I enjoy doing. And so the question then is whether or not we find this loop, this process that we're in, an enjoyable thing. If it is, then the hunt is worthwhile for us. So the true failure point of this cycle is not here at the bottom when we test and we find that we don't find the chest. The true failure point is when we run out of ideas and then go home and play canasta. Okay, the true failure point is when we give up on ourselves. So what then for people who wonder what the community of searchers is doing, why there are videos, why there are forums, why there are blogs, and why there are all these chats about it, this is where the community is supporting each other the best. We're not actually out there sharing necessarily our solutions and doing the tests together, because of course this is very much an activity which is individual and for small groups. It's a competition of sorts. But we support each other in that we share our reflections, we share some smaller ideas, and there's a pool of information there that we all can draw upon to forge something that's original for ourselves, which we can then go out and plan, test, and reflect on later. Okay, so this whole process, just to summarize this part, is what it's about, and we need to find some worth and some value and some enjoyment out of it. So then, if this is where we are, we can think of this whole process as one where we are continually rebounding from failure. And this is where I think the interesting tie-ins to your own stories, Forrest, come in, and your own book and your own memoirs. Some of your best stories that you have given in your scrapbooks or in your 3 memoirs or in your interviews are about failure. They're about hardships and overcoming it. And this is, in my opinion, one of the major lessons that you've had for us in the chase and in the supporting stories that you've shared with us. Think of, for instance, the long jump from the Leon River Bridge. The story starts with a failure, and then it concludes with you in the middle of the night going back to the bridge and jumping when your friends had already succeeded before you. And one of the things that is very satisfying about this story is how you tell us at the end that you decided not to even share your success with other people. It emphasizes the fact that this process of failure, testing, and hopefully eventual success is a personal one, and that it has a value that does not necessarily depend on putting on a display for other people. And there are many other instances that you've shared with us like that. When you were kickstarting your art business, when you were learning your skills, learning to cast bronze, setting up a foundry, building up an inventory of artifacts through trade. The stories are about how you were faced with difficulties that could have ended your business before it even properly began, and how through principles and attitude and work you were able to keep it going long enough for it to flourish. The story where this includes where you were talking about how you were learning the basic principles of pouring bronze when you blew up the concrete floor, and learning a lesson from that and then improving and moving on. So when you're talking also in The Thrill of the Chase about all the drama that you faced in school, the story about the stout-hearted men, these were, I think, sensitive, difficult points in your life where on the one hand you could say, it must have been difficult to write about and difficult to share about. And yet these examples of life's failures or life's difficulties or life's struggles and how they were eventually overcome, they're good lessons for us. And of course, your stories from Vietnam War and all the crazy and impossible situations that you found yourself in. These are situations where there was some of them just no good way out of them, and yet still the whole theme, I think, of My War for Me comes down to finding value in an impossible situation, finding worth in how you do things, and not just whether or not you succeed or fail. So anyway, one of the reasons why these stories are so appreciated is because of the generosity and sincerity that we as the readers and hearers find in them. So I think then to summarize the lesson that these stories have for us with respect to the chase is that these are all examples of situations where if there's no risk, there's no thrill. And it makes me wonder whether the thrill of the chase isn't really not about the treasure, but just about this whole struggle to realize one's goals, whatever they might have happen to be. This to me is the chase, and this is where the thrills are. And if there's no risks, if there's nothing on the line, if there's no investment of effort or something else, then the thrill is somehow less for it. So even in failure, I would say that the lessons here are that attitude is everything. That in the many situations that we find ourselves in where success is not guaranteed or success may just be virtually impossible, then it becomes even more important that we act in principled ways, in honorable ways, that we, like you said towards the end of My War for Me, that we be supportive of others. We do something to ease the passage of the people who are traveling through life with us, and that we should make efforts and that we should try for the sake of it. After all, life does not give us any real guarantees of success in anything we do. I may not find your treasure. My YouTube videos may not attract any views. The research problems that I work on may not be solved in my lifetime. If I start a business, it may not pan out, and the wars I fight, the various struggles that I have, may not be winnable. But as long as I can find value in the attempt, then it's worthwhile. You're still here? Okay. So let me just say a few things about this other stuff that I have here on the board. So you take a look at this diagram here. You can sort of interpret this as an exploration of one's search area. So let's imagine over here that on this diagram, this little X in this spot here, let's assume that that's the blaze, okay? And that we're in an area where if we look quickly down from the blaze, okay, towards a place where maybe our quest might cease, indicated by that letter Q, that we might be standing at the blaze and then looking down towards the center of some area whose radius is defined by some number R. So it could be R, could be 100 feet, it could be 40 feet, it could be 10 meters, whatever it might happen to be. So from the blaze to the point which is in the center and down, we can imagine a person walking and searching from the blaze. And initially, when you get to the blaze, the expectation is, wow, I'm at the blaze, it's probably at my feet. So this means when I start searching around at the blaze for the treasure, that search radius that I might be looking in is 0 or practically 0. And then if I don't find it, then what naturally happens is, well, we start going down, like the poem suggests us. So if we start walking down, then, of course, because we are looking and we're not finding it, the natural tendency then is to increase our search radius a bit as we go. until finally, when we're as far down as we can go, like you hint at in your book, when we are down at the bottom at Q, then we define our search radius as R, the whole extent of this area. So now the question that I'm analyzing right here is that if in this process you imagine somebody through time walking down from X, the blaze, down towards the bottom, and as they walk, they widen their search area as they progress down further and further down. They're widening their radius until finally when they're at the bottom, their search radius is at R. Then what priority does it put on various locations for examining first? So for instance, if there's some feature V sitting over here, initially when we're at the blaze, we say, okay, no, we're at the blaze, we just got here, we recognize it as the blaze, and so our search radius is 0, so we're not interested in going over and checking out V, because we're here, we haven't checked it out yet, we need to do this. But then as we start walking down, our willingness to deviate and to expand our search around grows. So what this here is a calculation as to at what point does our scope widen enough to include some other location V. And honestly, this is what this derivation is. So now, some of you might think that this is how I'm searching for the treasure, but in fact, this has nothing to do with this. This is actually something else that I have been working on for more than a year, related to my work in various ways. And it just so happened that having this on the board and thinking about the video, I found an interpretation of this work I was doing anyway in terms of the treasure hunt. I don't use any of my work, any of my research in the search. But you know, it's funny how things can just sort of match.